obviously, I was referring to a smaller phase, but it would be ridiculous for anybody to understate when the purpose would be to overstate.
Okay,
This is the kind of era
let's
leave
that and go to another point.
What I'm going to do, for the interest of time and trying to be respectful of Professor Dershowitz, is I'll simply quote your statements in the book, one after another, slowly. And you can simply stop me and say, I can prove that, or I have the evidence.
Sure.
Okay? Right. Simple. Page 206, you write, Israel is the only country in the Middle East to have abolished any kind of torture, in fact, as well as in law.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's start with that
right.
one.
Yeah.
The Israeli Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories has a website, and I follow it quite closely.
So do I.
I went to the website, and I checked under the heading for torture. I'll ask again Amy Goodman, rather than myself, to simply read the first sentence for the latest issue of B'Tselem, and if she wants to continue down.
It's called B'Tselem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories.
Please keep in mind, he said, Mr. Dershowitz said, in fact, as well as in law. Please.
The first headline, it says torture. Interrogation by torture and absolutely prohibited by Israeli and international law.
Right.
Despite this, Israeli security forces breached the prohibition and torture Palestinians during interrogation.
I don't agree with that. I mean, we have a reasonable dispute about that. What Israel does, and what Israel did until 1999, was what the United States is now doing in Guantanamo. That is, they put people in uncomfortable Shabak positions. They put hoods over their head, often foul-smelling hoods. They play loud music. There's a cover story in the Atlantic Monthly this month which talks about rough interrogation techniques, and it describes what the United States is doing, and it says that Israel used to do that. There's some possibility it continues to do it. That's simply not the kind of torture that international law prohibits, and in fact, my point is, in Jordan, torture is routine. In Egypt, it's routine.
Definitely.
The Israeli Supreme Court took an extraordinarily courageous decision in 1999. I commend everybody to read it. It's online, in which Justice Aaron Barak said that as a democracy, we must fight terrorism with one hand tied behind our back, but in the end, we have the upper hand because we comply with the rule of law. Israel is to be commended for its attempt to regulate and control the torture of ticking bomb terrorists. I am
so you stand by your statement that they do not torture.
Without any question, and that the Supreme Court has abolished it, and if anybody were to engage in an act that constituted torture, they would be in contempt
Mr.
of court.
Dershowitz.
Yes. And I am right and you're wrong on this
6 minutes.
I am simply right and
Less
you're
than
wrong
6
about
minutes
this.
to go.
Mr. Dershowitz.
All right, let's stop.
Amnesty International, who I know you think is an untrustworthy source, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, they all reach the same conclusion.
And they're wrong.
Israel still continues to practice torture. Well, you can say they're wrong, but let's be clear.
Describe what Israel does.
Sir,
What do you define as torture?
I'm not an expert in the topic.
You certainly are not, but yet you're making an accusation.
I don't make the accusation, Mr. Dershowitz. You're confusing things. I go to the mainstream, respected human rights organizations, and I look at what they say.
Let me talk about amnesty.
And they apply the international standards.
You have a number of points here.
Okay,
we have 5 minutes to go.
I need to respond to this.
You did respond.
No, I didn't respond to this.
Let's go to number two.
I need to respond to amnesty.
You have 30 seconds to respond.
Okay.
I was
Amnesty International.
B'Tselem.
Amnesty International recently said that Aharon Barak should not receive an international prize because he doesn't believe in human rights. He is one of the greatest advocates of human rights. Amnesty also on
Alan
its website.
Dershowitz, let me ask you a question. I'm going to interrupt for a second because you're on another point.
Right.
B'Tselem. You just think B'Tselem is wrong.
No, B'Tselem is wrong.
Okay, Norman Finkelstein, next point.
Because they define torture in a way that would include what the United States is doing.
We have 4 minutes to go. 4 minutes to the end of the program.
Number two, you write on page 126, there is no evidence that Israeli soldiers deliberately killed even a single civilian in Jenin.
Absolutely.
Now, Mr. Dershowitz, I looked carefully at your book. You don't like Amnesty International.
I'm a member.
You
of
don't
it.
like.
I'm a member.
I know,
of
but on
Amnesty
the question of
International.
Israel,
I'm a contributor
on the question
to
of
Amnesty
Israel,
International.
on the
I
que-
like Amnesty
okay,
on
on the
Israel
question
in
of
a
Let
great
him
many
make-
instances, but I disagree with some of his conclusions.
And you don't particularly like B'Tselem.
I do like B'Tselem. If I
Okay.
were an Israeli, I'd belong
Mr.
to B'Tselem.
Dershowitz.
So don't characterize
okay,
my views.
Mr.
You don't know my
Dershowitz,
views.
I read your book,
Right.
or the book you purport
Well,
to have written.
Right. Now you're claiming somebody else wrote it?
I hope so. For your sake,
Yeah.
I truly hope you
proudly
did
wrote
not
this
write that book.
I proudly wrote it.
I think the
And
honorable
I
thing for
urge
you to
people
do would be to say, I didn't write the book. I had no time to read it. I'm sorry.
I wrote every word
That
of
would
it,
be the honorable
and
thing.
I urge. I have
Okay,
my
you've
hand
made
on
the
drafts.
point about
I
Jenin
urge
and
other
whether
people
an
to do
Israeli
it.
soldier,
No, wait, I want
whether
to quote. Let's quote
Deliberately shot a
okay,
civilian.
let's
2 minutes.
quote Human Rights Watch.
Yes.
They put out an extensive report on Jenin. Now, Human Rights Watch, you nowhere in your book mention. Nowhere. Let's see what Human Rights Watch concluded on Jenin. Quote, there's prima facie evidence that Israel committed, quote, war crimes in Jenin. Further, quote, and I want everyone to listen carefully, many of the civilian killings documented by Human Rights Watch amounted to unlawful or willful killings by the IDF. Please listen to the words.
I'm listening to the
Willful
words,
killings.
and I deal with this very directly in my book.
And then Human Rights Watch copiously documents multiple cases of willful killings by Israel.
Okay.
What did Mr. Dershowitz write? What did Mr. Dershowitz
absolutely
write? There is
right.
not a single case
instance.
of yeah. You want to
Not
know,
only not a
Mr.
single case in
Dershowitz,
Jenin, but let me tell you
Jenin.
why I make my point. I make my point because there is absolutely no incentive for the United States or for Israel or for any other democracy ever willfully to kill an innocent civilian. Every time an innocent civilian is killed, it hurts Israel. It hurts it domestically.
Allow me an
it hurts it.
example.
No. Let me finish my point. It hurts it internationally. Now, every country engaged in urban guerrilla warfare will inadvertently kill civilians. But the very idea that an Israeli soldier who are trained in the idea of the holiness of arms, who get better training about avoiding civilians,
Allow me
who are
to read an
punished,
example.
who are punished for killing
let
civilians.
Norman Finkelstein
Okay.
read a response.
Let-
You're making the
There's
point
no
that in
incentive.
general you
Mr.
wouldn't think they
no
would.
Dershowitz gave
incentive
a
to
very
kill a
lovely
civilian.
bar mitzvah
Right.
speech. Now let's read
Now,
what
that's a
Mr.
little ad
let's
hominem, too,
let's
I
see
would
what the
think. Maybe
Human
even a
Rights
little
Watch
racist.
wrote. Quote, among the civilian deaths were those of Kamu Zigir. Listen carefully. A 57-year-old wheelchair-bound man who was shot and run over by a tank on a major road outside the camp on April 10, even though he had a white flag attached to his wheelchair. That sounds pretty deliberate to me,
If
Mr.
it's
Hirsch.
true,
If it's
and
true,
the Israeli
the whole
authorities
world
have
is
done-
lying. Only Joan
No.
Peters tells the truth.
Wait. First of all, Joan Peters has never written about this issue. This issue is one where, of course, not only the Israeli military, but the United States has investigated Jenin. The United Nations has investigated Jenin. Some of the
Did
same
they make
people-
up that example?
Some of the
Let's
same
get
sources.
this clear.
Some of the same
Did Human
sources
Rights Watch
that
make
you're
up that
citing
example?
First said there
Did
were
Human Rights Watch
5,000
make up that
people
example?
killed. No, that was an
Did
example.
Human Rights
It-
you said
they were given it to
please,
them
Mr.
by a
Dershowitz,
source,
this is
and
disgraceful.
it was disputed.
You're shaming
I'm
your
not-
institution.
I'm not, except first
You're
of all,
shaming your institution.
Let me make it very clear. I
You
don't
said,
speak on behalf
you
of
said
Harvard. I
not
speak
a
on behalf.
single.
Not a single one.
Did Human Rights Watch
Absolutely.
make that up?
No, but
Did Human
whoever-
Rights Watch make it up?
Human Rights Watch
Did
attributes
it make it up?
Let me,
No.
can
Did
I
they make
finish
up
my-
that
can I
example?
finish my point?
All right, on that note,
What
we're
happens
wrapping up
is
the
what
program.
happens is Human Rights quotes people who
Did you, Professor
who make
Dershowitz,
it
let
up,
me
of
ask this
course,
question.
yes.
Did you investigate the Human Rights Watch
Of
report?
course I did, and I read it.
And you found that to
and
be
I found
incredible.
that to be incorrect. Not only that, the United States government has found that to be incorrect. And
On
not
that
only
note, we have to wrap up the show. I want to thank you both for
just-
being with us. Alan Dershowitz, The Case for Israel, Norman Finkelstein, The Holocaust Industry. You decide. Our website, www.democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.